Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for attending this roundtable. We have a panel of experts that are going to explain to us how the Spanish public administration faces cyber threats of critical civilian infrastructures in times of war. When we talk about crucial targets and infrastructures according to the law, we talk about any infrastructure that affects the security of the country. But when we talk about infrastructure, we also talk about schools or other instances. And are they protected in terms of cybersecurity? In my opinion, no. The cybersecurity culture is quite limited in this regard, and this is one of the ideas we wanted to discuss with the speakers. Why the civil Spanish society or the private sector have difficulties to reach the administration, which is open all the time, but also to use the tools and to know that the state can help them. We have Rafael García, commander of the cyberspace, Guillermo Fernández, coordinator of the cybersecurity, Mr. Pérez, and Javier Candau, the cybersecurity head. So let's start with the order on the paper. So, sir, you have the floor. Thank you very much, and good morning. First of all, I would like to thank INCIBE for the opportunity to be part of this ENISE edition. Now, talking about the topic that gathers us together, I was fearful because we were talking about attacks against civilians in times of war. So, analyzing the title, I was wondering, what am I talking about? When we talk about times of war, first doubt came to my mind: when are we in times of war? Because now there is no declared war now, but we see what is going on in Ukraine on a daily basis after the Russian invasion. So when we talk about times of war, the question is, are we always in war? Are we always facing conflict? This is a question I would like you to think about. But talk about times of war when we face what we are facing now, raises some questions about what is times of war. And something happened to me when I was thinking about civilian targets. And again, if we talk about Ukraine again, the line separating military targets from civilian targets is a very thin, blurring line. We hear more and more about the gray area in a conflict which is not a conflict, in targets that are there but that exist, but they are not there. When we talk about critical infrastructure, I'm not going to deal with that now, but sometimes I think, what would happen if the 112 service would be attacked in Spain? So I doubt how to define times of war and how to define civilian targets, but undoubtedly, and I have no doubt about it, about the first word, cyberattacks. Cyberattacks, like it or not, is here and is here to stay. It's here to stay and to increase further. We are not going to talk about statistics, but ransomware and data ransoms have increased 700%, and this not only affects us in times of war, but it affects all the time. So a cultural change is required, and as someone mentioned, we need to focus on that. We need to be all aware of that, not only those who are here, but society at large has to be aware of that. Cyber attacks are something that happen on a daily basis, regularly, and we need to prepare to that. If attacks are against systems for systems not to work, or if attacks are geared towards information, we need to be aware that data might be used by hackers, medical data, bank data, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but as you know, all this we should all be aware of that. But the only thing I have clear in mind is that cyber attacks are here and are here to stay, and we need to focus on the cultural change someone was referring to before. And just to conclude this part of my presentation, I would like to insist and say, from an armed force point of view, the two ideas the Secretary of State for Defense are important, and it's important to disseminate this idea, meaning we have the national technology that is enough to face cyber attack. We don't have to look outside the country. This is important from an armed force point of view, and from those who are sitting here point of view. The armed forces are another actor in this war, in this cyber attacks war, and this war we live on a daily basis, and we are another actor. And as the Secretary of State for Defense mentioned, collaboration is extremely important, and I would like to insist on that. In private-public collaboration is important. We cannot face cyber attacks only from a public part or from a private sector. We need to collaborate, and we need to face cyber attacks in these times who are not times of war, where civilian targets are hacked. Thank you. Thank you, Commander. Guillermo? I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. As the Commander mentioned, the title is appalling, and I would like to mention the situation in Spain, but also to the warfare situation in Ukraine. So, civilian targets in times of war. Let me remind you that this has been forbidden by the international humanitarian law that stipulates how conflicts should develop. In war, everything is worth. No, not everything is worthwhile in times of war. So attacks against civilians is forbidden. So the legislation, since the rise of cyber and the awareness in the European Union, let me tell you that Directive 40/2013, talking about cyber attacks, harmonized some important milestone in the European crimes in the European Union. Many of the things that apply to the penal sector applies to the cyber sector. In traditional treaties, cyber attacks are forbidden, also by the United Nations. And there's an important document which is not the official doctrine but is well known, and that has been supported by and ratified by many countries and experts, is the Operation Manual of the NATO Operational Command, that talks about crimes in the physical field to crimes in the civilian field. So to summarize my first intervention and to highlight the role of the Ministry of the Interior facing this kind of event is the updating of the instruction of the Secretariat of State of 2006. Support teams were created thanks to this instruction 222, instruction 222, and these police support teams, National Police and the Civil Guard, specifically, have some capabilities in the service of other states or the international court whenever crimes against humanity have been committed in other countries where we can assist to. This is to make sure that the Ministry of the Interior is really aware of the graveness of the geopolitical situation we face now. So let me give you the word to Senapic. Thank you and good morning to everybody. I would like also to thank the Institute for the invitation to this very important event in this region. As my colleagues mentioned, the first thing that comes to mind when you read the title of this roundtable is civilian targets and how can we define this. Two important points for reflection. My colleague Guillermo said something which is important. Not everybody is not everything is worthwhile in times of war. We also have the international law and the United Nations with tools that ban the use of some tools when uncontrolled damage is provoked or when other damages can be caused against facilities or infrastructures that have not been identified as a target. Therefore, and insisting on the title of this roundtable, civilian targets, when civilian targets are not a formal target in times of war, or when we are not formally living in a time of war, we talk about infrastructure, but it's very complicated. The attacks on these infrastructures not having an impact on many other things. So this reflection is important. How can we use the tools that produce cyber attacks? And we need to reflect upon that after wartime. And another important thing I identified when I was reading some of the documents in this regard is that since January and up to July, more than 250 cyber attacks have been documented against civilian targets from Russia on Ukraine. But behind these cyber attacks, formal attack or conventional war attack happened in the fields where the previous cyber attack happened. Let me give you some examples about that. I was reading the situation on only 2 months, but on February 14th, for example, that was very special. Many critical infrastructures that have been declared by Ukraine were compromised with attacks in Odessa, and then the forces entered the city. Social media were compromised as well. Some days later in Kiev, and some days communication towers have been destroyed. On February 2nd, a pro-Russian group attacked the system of one of the Ukraine nuclear energy facilities, and the following day the Russian forces occupied the plant, the nuclear plant. So many cyber attacks have been followed by conventional war action. So this reflection is interesting. Behind a cyber attack against a civilian target has always been a replication by conventional war actions and agents. Thank you very much. Javier, I have the floor now. Okay, then. Our contribution is going to be hard because we talk about a very general topic, civilian targets in times of war and cyber attacks in times of war, but I would like to talk about collateral damages. In the conflict between Ukraine and Russia at the beginning of February, actors responsible for cybersecurity in Spain feared something. Attacks on cyberspace would come out of control, having an impact on our infrastructure, on our government systems, etc. I would like to provide you with a fast taxonomy of threats. First, who is the threat? Who are we facing when we face a threat? We face actors that are state-sponsored or cyber attacks that are part of the armed forces in the intelligence services who have a very deep knowledge of technologies, even a very deep knowledge of the systems that are being under attack. For us, this would be the most important vector, and we need to pay attention to that. Then we also have cybercrime groups that work on the basis of sympathies with a great knowledge, but using always opportunities. And lastly, we've seen a recruitment process of voluntaries from Russia and Ukraine. And we've had many different groups with different names that have been working to publish data, to destroy websites, etc. So this is who. Now, in terms of techniques, we've seen that groups that are considered more advanced group have been massively used destructive weapons, wiper, ransomwares with modifications on disks, etc. So as you can see, all this will lead to a refusal of services period and non-operation that is going to be long. And then the refusal of service and everything might be considered also as volatile. And then the most important thing is victims. Victims concentrate in both countries, and no collateral casualties or victims happened. But we bear in mind what happened in 2017, the first destructive malware we were aware of, when refusal of service, mass refusal of service happened with a great deal of collateral damages. So they are in the conflict scenario. They are part of it, so this situation has not been controlled, but things can come out of control easily. So, facing this, what are the actions taken by the government and the Ministry of the Interior or the National Criptológico Center, INCIBE, and other actors? A team force were created to analyze if our structures, infrastructures, and systems are resilient to attacks. So, the public administration part published a list of threats and a report entitled Urgent Measures According to the Level of Alerts. So these measures are 26. There are 5 levels. Level 1, normality situation. Level 2, low level of attacks, up until level 5, which is the critical level of attack. So we automated responses. So what we see is, if we analyze the document levels 1 and 2 are basic measures, a standard cybersecurity level that should be covered. But then when we asked, this basic level is covered only 60-78%. We couldn't move on to levels 3, 4, and 5 because basic measures have not been implemented, or we don't have them. So this helps us to know how prepared are we in the event a crisis escalates. So many lessons have been learned from that. So these measures, according to the level of alert and how organizations have implemented them, led to the following conclusions. Levels 1 and 2 are a subgroup of the national scheme of security. And then we move on to the following one. If we don't have something strict in terms of cybersecurity, and if the private sector and other organizations of the public sector don't have anything written, we will have difficulties in complying with all the requirements. The second question was, do we have an homogeneous measure system? Because the question was, are we protected? What is the security level we are complying with? And the range is big with many approaches. And also, we need to evaluate this on an ongoing basis, which is extremely difficult because this is the first time this kind of situations happen, and this is the first time we encounter this kind of crisis. So, at least this part helped us to draw some conclusions and have interesting lessons learned. So, thank you very much. Just a summary of what the speakers said, and then I'll ask the first questions, and feel free to answer. So first of all, it's not clear what types of war is, and are we facing a cyber war exactly? And this affects civil society because, as our colleague said, after cyber war actions or cyber attacks, any kind of types or refusal of services from somewhere, military attacks happen. So to what extent are we to understand all the implications of that? The Ministry of the Interior talk about the involvement of defense that companies and public administration should have in order for them to reach better civil society. And he mentioned all the cases where this is not fulfilled, when cyber war has been used as a spear gear or a spearhead for attacking critical infrastructure. The question would be, to what extent an attack on the Ministry of the Education and Culture, or an attack on databases of minors of schools in Spain, are they vulnerable to obtaining this information? And that what the National Criptológico Center talked about, a national scheme, and from level 2, critical factor, society at large doesn't know exactly what has to be complied with according to the GDPR of 2018. And according to statistics, this only accounts for 20-30% of Spanish companies. So, two questions. What would the future be of this implication of civil societies, military and private sector? And the second question is, why and how society in Spain at large doesn't have knowledge enough of the capabilities of public administration and the military sector in Spain, and why doesn't the society is supported by that? Because we've seen that in other countries like Morocco or France, public and private partnership work very well. So it's up to you to answer. I know the questions are really large. Yeah, it is large, but one of the initiatives, and many of us here might talk about initiatives, similar initiatives that are being implemented, but a cultural change is necessary. The National Forum of Security is working very well, working with the public administration of the state and working with companies, universities, and other actors that might be involved in cybersecurity. So the forum is working with them. We already have 5 work teams, work groups, and the public sector is involving the actor, and we need to involve more society at large. We need to make the work of the forum more visible so that the society at large is aware of that, not only companies and the public sector. Yeah, we have one of the most important initiatives in Europe by the Ministry of the Interior, the Cyber School in Avila, and 3,000 people have been reached, both in physically but also virtually, to know more about cyber wall. So this could be a cyber success story, and this has been organized by the Civil Guard, and as the General mentioned, PPP is something the national security system is aware of. We also have the forum, which is a success story that could be extrapolated to other countries. For example, the last work group group 5 on coordination, and It's coordinated by the Ministry of the Interior together with the Elcano Royal Institute. Now, concerning awareness of the Ministry of the Interior, the strategic plan implemented since 2021, one of the principles of this plan talk about PPPs, as it happens in the forum. And just to complement the previous questions of Javier, in terms as to the geopolitical situation and everything that happens with the war between Russia and Ukraine in Spain, the committee has been alerted. We started working immediately in a collaborative way. The Ministry of the Interior launched an instruction, because they are the authority for cybersecurity policies and protection of critical infrastructure, and essential services providers should adopt measures to increase cybersecurity measures affecting institutions and citizens. So why is it difficult for civil society to join? Just to answer to the second question, I would like to rebuke a little bit the question, because knowledge on cybersecurity is complex. Society is everything. So what we have to do is to start identifying who are the main institutions, organizations, entities that need to know more immediately, and from that on distribute the knowledge to the rest of society. I think a good job has been done in terms of critical infrastructure application of the law of 2018, and when this act was implemented, or thanks to that, we identified the main operators at a national level, which were really aware of the need of integral protection. And then, thanks to the regulation of 2018, more was done in terms of cybersecurity. Dissemination files were created. We discussed with private companies and schools. So I don't think there's part of a society which is not informed or that doesn't have the appropriate tools. Everything happens slowly. But the problem is everything has been accelerated by the situation we're facing. But I think the job has been good and everything has been done properly, because we analyzed the main needs to implement measures and know about the measures, and from that on built on cybersecurity. And this is a scenario we are in now, knowing and disseminating actions, etc.
Javier? Yes, very briefly, as I think we're running out of time. I also think that when we are living a war situation, it's different from living in peace. So society is not the same in times of war and in peaceful times. So we might need to take this to the extreme. I think this has helped us learn and also to raise awareness, and I would like to focus on the public administrations, and I would like to give you some data. In 2021 we have 140 incidents related to ransomware in our public organizations. This year alone we have not even had 50, so this is a reduction of around 60%. What does it mean? Well, it means that the level of cybersecurity of our public administrations are improving significantly. And I think that this is also happening elsewhere. The NIS directive and the new NIS 2.0 make essential and critical infrastructures to improve the cybersecurity. I believe that both Spain and obviously Europe, we are aligned and we are on the same wavelength. This is making our cybersecurity levels improve. So I would like to look at the positive picture. Perfect. Okay, so that's the end of this roundtable. I'm not sure whether any of the speakers would like to add anything. So the conclusion is that we are well on our way. We have the necessary tools and capacities, and now we just need to penetrate in society and to achieve our goals. Then something else is the achievement of resources in order to comply with these objectives.